I wanted to discuss how to avoid plagiarism from the very beginning so that students can understand how to avoid this breach of academic honesty. And this applies to essays, to research papers, to discussion posts. So it's important that students know, and I think that they have missed out on some of that information along the way. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware from the beginning. So when you are getting ready to research your essay or your paper, use scholarly websites. Scholarly sites will end in either .org or .edu. There'll be journals, journal websites, books, research from universities or colleges, and typically ORG sites are nonprofits. So I think that that's the safest way to be sure that you're getting reputable sources of information. Always paraphrase the information unless you use quotation marks and you cite them in your paper. Don't copy a quote without putting in the citation for that. Cite your sources at the end of your essay, always, always. You can either use websites like citationmachine.net or EasyBib to format your bibliography. School to school, the formats differ somewhat. MLA, Chicago, or APA, so you have to make sure that you are aware of the format that your particular institution prefers. You can also use in Word, in Microsoft Word, there is a feature called references, and you can enter all of your information in your document once you start writing your essay or your paper, and you can store all of the sites that you use, and it will format your bibliography for you at the end. You can choose from a variety of different types of formats from law schools to medical school site formats to general MLA or Chicago or APA formats. So Word is a great place to store your work because you've always got it. Whenever you open up your paper, you've got all the sources that you used right there. For the don'ts of avoiding plagiarism, don't use other students' papers as information sources. Other students are not experts. So you are looking for expert information. Do not use any student's paper as a source of information. It is not reputable. Not that those students don't know what they're talking about, but they lack the credibility of the quote-unquote experts. Make sure you paraphrase your information. Change the wording, change the sentence structure. Don't just put in synonyms and leave the structure as it is. Make sure that you put the information in your own words. Read it, think about it in your own words, and then type it into your computer. But do not just change a word or two. That does not suffice. Don't resubmit work already submitted during another term by you or another student. Those are both breaches of academic honesty. So if you took the course and had to retake it, don't resubmit the same paper twice, because it will show up as, in the plagiarism checker, it will show up as 100% plagiarized because you've already submitted it once. Don't submit another person's work as your own. And as I said, don't source another student's paper at all. I don't mean to be overbearing. I just don't want anybody to be charged with plagiarism or academic honesty issues because of lack of knowledge. Don't use a quote without citing it in your paper and at the end of your paper too. So it is important that you cite the work in both locations. Don't use too many quotes for your paper. Your instructor wants your analysis, not just a series of quotes. So you would want to have not more than 10% of your paper be quotes, if that much. The only time you really want to use quotes is when you absolutely can't say it any better than the person who said it. So if whatever you want to get across is better said by an authority, then maybe that's okay if you want to use a quote by Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, because they have more authority than you or I or anybody else. Then you might want to use their quote. But otherwise, you want to keep that to on a limited basis for quoting. Safe Assign is the plagiarism checker, and it's much like Turnitin. And the reports can either be called a similarity report or an originality report, and acceptable levels, depending on your instructor or your institution, can range from 10 to 25%. 25% is the upper reach of that acceptability. Typically, I think four-year universities use 10% as the legal limit. So I took a picture of Safe Assign, and Turnitin would be the same depending on the source, the learning management system that you use. This happens to be Blackboard. But what you'll see is when you submit your paper, you will get, when you go back and look, you'll get an originality report, and it says View Originality Report. So this person's originality score was 14%, which is perfectly acceptable. Then you have View Originality Report. So you click here to see your stats. Okay, so then what you see, this is what I see, it color codes where the statement came from. So if you look here, you've got the yellow highlighting, this is where that statement came from, or the blue highlighting, and this is where the statement came from. Now in a live copy of this, an instructor would be able to see, they could click on this live link and see the student's paper. Instructors on these types that are not live, instructors can request from the previous instructor, they can request the access to that paper. So, and I've had that happen before. The instructor will request access, and then they will get, they'll get access or not to the previous student's paper. Maybe number two's paper I want access to that. So I would click on this, and so students, I think, underestimate the amount of transparency that there is when submitting papers to the learning management system. So those are images for the Safe Assign, and Turnitin is the same way through D2L, through CourseDen or Brightspace. So if you want to check your papers ahead of time before you submit, usually you can submit the paper, and your instructors many times will have it set up so that you can put in as many submissions as you want. You can check your own paper to see what the originality report comes back at if you are concerned about it. And then there are also free plagiarism checkers online. So there's not really a reason to be caught in this situation. Ask your instructor. If you have a question about whether or not something is acceptable or not, make sure that you ask about whether or not a site is reputable, or whether or not you are guilty of plagiarizing and how to repair that before you submit that paper, because the consequences are pretty tough. You range from no credit to failing a course to, at some points, in some institutions, being expelled from the class, from the school, for academic honesty breaches. So plagiarism is not a joke, and I wanted everybody to be aware of this before we get started for the term. So I hope that helps, and always remember, if you have a question, ask your instructor. Thanks.